Now, when you hear the word Cornish, it is likely to stir thoughts of a pasty at your local bakery. But there is more to the state's Cornish heritage than just baked goods. While proposed new mines on Yorke Peninsula hog the headlines, it's the region's Cornish mining heritage that some believe deserves global recognition. Between pasties, Matthew Doran reports from Moonta.
The rust and dust may have long set in, but more than a century ago, this part of South Australia's Yorke Peninsula was abuzz with the sound of pickaxes and the hum of boiler engines.
You know, the old stories that wherever there's a hole in the ground, you'll find a Cornishman at the bottom of it digging for metal. It's sort of true, really. I mean, it's a truism.
Philip Payton is a professor of Cornish and Australian studies at the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom. He first visited South Australia's Cornish sites in his 20s and is passionate about helping Moonta and its Cornish mining predecessor Burra receiving greater recognition.
This is distinctively and absolutely Cornish. They were made of pressed felt, and the candle is stuck on the front with, these are tallow candles, stuck on the front with a hunk of clay. And this is exactly as it was in Cornwall. This is exactly Cornish practice.
The areas are already protected by state heritage laws, but Professor Payton is now campaigning for a loftier protection, a place on the National Heritage List.
The whole atmosphere of the place was overridingly Cornish, and that was recognised not only here and in Australia, but it's also recognised in Cornwall itself. And I think this is one of the enduring things about Moonta and Wallaroo and Kadina. They have this particular place in the heart of Cornish emigration.
At its peak in the 1870s, more than 12,000 people lived in Moonta, making it South Australia's second largest town. Combined with its neighbours Kadina and Wallaroo, commonly known as the Copper Triangle, more than 20,000 people called this industrial hub home. At the time, almost half the state's immigrants had jumped on a boat from Cornwall to get their hands dirty on Yorke Peninsula.
And in 1866, the bottom fell out of the copper market in Cornwall. Scores of mines closed literally overnight. And luckily, I suppose you could say, for people in Cornwall, for Cornish miners, this collapse of the Cornish copper mining industry coincided with the rise of Moonta and Wallaroo.
Well, this is Richmond's tailings heap.
Fellow Cornish expert, archaeological surveyor Ash Lenton from the Australian National University, believes the sites meet, if not surpass, the benchmarks set by the Federal Environment Department.
There are very few historical sites that, certainly in Australia, that compare for the research value. There are hundreds and hundreds of houses, miners' cottages, around this place. The miners built them themselves. They threw them up overnight after doing a long shift down the mine. Now, most of those have been lost now, but they're still an archaeological resource.
World Heritage sites are of outstanding significance across the whole world.
If the bid manages to meet the benchmarks for national protection, Moonta and Burra will join the likes of the Sydney Opera House and the Great Ocean Road. It looks likely that could happen by late next year. They're then prepared to take their battle to a global audience. When the UN's heritage body UNESCO listed Cornwall's mining landscapes in the United Kingdom as World Heritage Sites, it left the door open for the influence of Cornish emigrants to be recognised as well.
So there was this sense almost of unfinished business, that to really recognise the Cornish mining landscape, one had to take in the overseas places, not least here in South Australia.
And there would have been people, thousands and thousands of people from the age of 6 upwards.
While the mine shafts may have long fallen silent, Moonta and Burra are seen by people such as Ash Lenton as the birthplace of modern industry in Australia.
So once the ore had been brought out of the mine, it was brought here, crushed up to get, to make it into smaller, more, if you like, more manageable sizes, and then they can extract the copper out of there.
The Cornish brought with them massive beam engines. Many of their housings are still standing and preserved in Moonta. They powered the mines that stretched for hundreds of metres underground and their processing facilities on the surface.
before about the 1840s, Australia was really almost entirely an agricultural economy. So bringing this big, heavy industry here really was the start of the industrial age in Australia. So you could probably say that this was the Industrial Revolution happening.
It was that industry, born of Cornish migrants, that literally dug the then colony of South Australia out of bankruptcy.
So in the 1840s, if you like, the colonial venture was really failing in South Australia. The miners who came firstly to Burra, north of here, and then here to Moonta and Kadina, they really rescued that colonial enterprise, and South Australia took off.
The output from Moonta and Wallaroo combined more than outdid the big mines of Cornwall, and in their relatively short lives here from the 1860s, early 1860s through to 1923, they outdid the production of Cornish mines, which had been in production for even longer periods, much longer periods.
The wealth generated in Moonta is still recognised in the state's capital. Sir Walter Watson Hughes owned the land where much of the copper deposits were found. He went on to be a major benefactor for the University of Adelaide, and his likeness now sits outside its North Terrace campus.
The more that people can understand the real significance globally, internationally of this locality in the history not only of Australia but of international mining and Cornish mining particularly, then that's got to be a good thing.
Lovely story from Matt Doran there in Moonta.